I still remember the sound of my mother's wedding ring hitting the aluminum table in the interrogation room. Not the soft clink you'd expect, but a sharp metallic crack that made the detective across from me flinch. She'd twisted it off her finger with such force I thought she might have bruised the knuckle. "This was my grandmother's," she said, her voice steady in that terrifying way it got when she was about to do something irreversible. "Platinum band, 1947, appraised at $4,200 last year. I'm giving it to my daughter as collateral for her bail." I was 19 years old, sitting in the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office outside Portland, Oregon, charged with felony theft. The ring sat between us like an accusation. Detective Morales, young, maybe 30, with careful eyes and a wedding band of his own, looked from my mother to me and back again. "Mrs. Calloway, your daughter's bail is set at $50,000. This ring is more than she deserves," my mother interrupted, "but it's what I have." That was 4 years ago, in late March, when the rain in Oregon comes down like a persistence you can't argue with. I'd been working at Hearthstone Gardens, a boutique nursery in West Lynn, for 8 months. My supervisor, a man named Gerald Tennyson, had noticed discrepancies in the cash register. $1,700 over the course of 2 months. He'd reviewed the security footage, he said, and the timestamps matched my shifts. He'd called the police before talking to me. I hadn't taken the money, but I couldn't prove I hadn't either. The charges were eventually dropped. Insufficient evidence, my public defender said, though she delivered the news with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Gerald had been so certain. He'd testified at the preliminary hearing with the kind of detail that makes jurors lean forward. Specific dates, exact amounts, my habit of staying late to organize the supply closet. The prosecutor had loved him, but the security footage had gaps, technical glitches that the defense exploited. The case fell apart not because I was proven innocent, but because the proof of guilt wasn't quite solid enough. My mother never asked if I'd done it. She took her ring back from the county clerk without a word, and wore it every day after that. But something had shifted between us. She looked at me the way you look at a door you thought was locked. I moved out 6 weeks later, into a studio apartment in Milwaukee, with carpet that smelled like someone else's decisions. I worked at a coffee shop, then a bookstore, then overnight shifts at a shipping warehouse. Places where I wouldn't handle money. Places where the background check ended at charges dropped. By the time I turned 23, I'd learned to live small. I didn't make friends easily. I didn't date. I kept my mouth shut and my head down, and told myself that invisibility was a kind of safety. Then I met Rosalind. Amherst. It was October, that brief window when Portland pretends it might not rain for a few days. I was working at Powell's Books in Burnside, reshelving returns in the Blue Room, when a woman in her mid-50s approached me. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob, expensive glasses, and the kind of posture that suggested she'd never slouched in her life. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for something on cognitive behavioral approaches to trauma recovery, not pop psychology, actual clinical texts." I led her to the psychology section, pulled 3 books I knew were solid, and mentioned a 4th that was on order. She studied me with the same attention she'd given the spines. "You're familiar with the literature," she said. It wasn't a question. I read a lot. "Do you have a degree?" 2 years at Portland State. I didn't finish. She handed me a business card. Rosalind Amherst, Ph.D., licensed clinical psychologist. An address in Lake Oswego, which meant money. "I'm looking for someone to manage my practice," she said. "Office coordination, scheduling, intake paperwork, insurance verification. It's administrative, but it requires discretion and intelligence. I think you might be right for it." I should have been suspicious. People with practices in Lake Oswego don't recruit staff from the aisles of bookstores, but I was tired of the warehouse, tired of coming home at dawn with my back aching and my hands smelling like cardboard. And there was something about the way she looked at me, not with pity or suspicion, but with assessment, like I was a problem she was already solving. The interview was the following Tuesday. Her office was on the second floor of a renovated craftsman house, all exposed beams and indirect lighting. The waiting room had chairs that looked comfortable without being soft, art that was calming without being obvious. There were 2 other therapy rooms, both empty that day, and a small kitchen with a water filtration system, and organic tea. Rosalind hired me on the spot. $42,000 a year, health insurance, 2 weeks paid vacation. I'd be working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, managing appointments for her and the 2 associate therapists who rented the other offices. She'd train me on the scheduling software, the insurance systems, the legal requirements around client confidentiality. I need someone I can trust, she said, handing me an employment contract. Someone who understands that what happens in these rooms stays in these rooms. Can you do that? Yes, I said. She smiled. It was a warm smile, professional but genuine. Good. Because my clients come to me with their worst moments, Evelyn, I need to know that those moments are safe here. I started the following Monday. For the first month, the job was exactly what Rosalind had described. I arrived at 8:30 to open the office, made coffee, reviewed the day's schedule. Clients arrived, spent 50 minutes in one of the 3 therapy rooms, and left. I verified insurance, processed co-pays, sent appointment reminders. Rosalind saw 6 to 7 clients a day. The associate therapist, a woman named Monica Stroud, and a man named Eric Haverford, each saw 4 or 5. Rosalind was exacting, but never harsh. She noticed when I reorganized the filing system to be more efficient. She complimented my phone manner with difficult clients. Once, when a man became agitated in the waiting room, pacing and muttering, she stepped out of her office and spoke to him in a voice so calm and firm that he sat down immediately. After he left, appointment rescheduled, crisis averted, she brought me tea and asked if I was all right. That's not going to be a regular occurrence, she said, but it can happen. If you ever feel unsafe, you leave. You don't wait for permission. Understood? I nodded. I'd never had a boss who cared whether I felt unsafe. By December, I'd fallen into the rhythm of the place. I knew which clients liked to chat and which wanted silence. I knew that Monica's clients were mostly college students dealing with anxiety, and that Eric specialized in couples therapy. I knew Rosalind's clients were different, older, more guarded, often arriving in expensive cars and leaving with faces that looked hollowed out by effort. I also knew that on Thursdays, Rosalind had a standing appointment at 4:30 that never appeared in the scheduling system. I noticed it by accident. The system flagged overlapping appointments, and one Thursday in mid-December, I got an error message when I tried to book a new client at 4:30. But the calendar showed the slot as open. I checked the paper log Rosalind still kept in her desk drawer, a backup system she insisted on, and there it was, written in her precise handwriting, 4:30 t.m. I didn't ask about it. It wasn't my business. But I started paying attention, and the pattern was consistent. Every Thursday at 4:30, a man arrived. Always. The same man. Mid-40s, dark hair graying at the temples, expensive but understated clothes. He never checked in with me. He walked straight to Rosalind's office and knocked once softly. She'd open the door, let him in, and close it. 60 minutes later, he'd leave the same way without acknowledgement. I didn't know his name. The paper log only ever said TM. In January, Rosalind gave me a raise. $5,000 a year, retroactive to my start date. She also asked if I'd be willing to take on additional responsibilities, handling some of the continuing education coordination for the practice, managing the quarterly audits for insurance compliance. It meant more hours, but it also meant she trusted me. "You've been an asset, Evelyn," she said. We were in her office, late afternoon, the winter light slanting through the windows in that pale, tired way it does in the Pacific Northwest. "I know you didn't finish your degree, But you have the kind of mind that doesn't need a degree to be valuable. I want you to know I see that. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. I felt something crack open in my chest, something I'd been keeping sealed. Thank you, I managed. She smiled. I also want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you feel safe here? Do you feel like this is a place where you can grow? Yes, I said. And I meant it. Good, because I'm planning to expand the practice. Maybe bring on another associate, which means I'll need someone who can handle more autonomy, someone I don't have to supervise constantly. She paused. I think you're that person. But if you have any doubts, any concerns about the work or the environment, I need to know now. I thought about TM, about the Thursday appointments that didn't exist in the system, but that felt like the kind of thing a good employee didn't question. Rosalind was entitled to her own clients, her own methods. No concerns, I said. The first Thursday in February, TM didn't show up. I noticed because Rosalind kept checking the waiting room. At 4:30, she stood at her office door looking out. At 4:40, she went to the window that faced the street. At 4:50, she came to my desk. If anyone calls asking for me, tell them I'm unavailable, she said. Her voice was clipped, her face tight. Of course. She went back to her office and closed the door. I heard her on the phone, her voice low and urgent, though I couldn't make out the words. At 5:30, she left without saying goodbye. The next Thursday, TM was back, but something had changed. When he arrived, Rosalind didn't let him in right away. They stood in the hallway, speaking in voices too low for me to hear, and I saw her hand on his arm, firm, almost restraining. His face was flushed, his jaw tight. Whatever she said made him nod once, sharply, before she opened the door and they went inside. That session ran 90 minutes instead of 60. When he left, he looked exhausted, and Rosalind looked like she'd been holding her breath. I started paying closer attention. In March, I noticed that Rosalind had begun locking her office door between appointments, something she'd never done before. She also started carrying her laptop with her instead of leaving it on her desk. Once I came back from lunch early and found her in the file room, going through the locked cabinet where we kept archived records. She didn't hear me at first, and I watched her pull a folder, photograph something with her phone, and put it back. When she turned and saw me, she didn't startle. Evelyn, she said calmly, I thought you were at lunch. I came back early. Do you need help with something? No, just checking on an old case for a consultation. She closed the cabinet, locked it, and walked past me. I'll be in my office if anyone needs me. That night I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. The rational part of my brain said this was nothing. Therapists reviewed old cases. They kept detailed records. They had clients with complicated needs. But the part of my brain that had learned to watch for danger, the part that had been trained by a felony charge and a mother who stopped trusting me, was louder. I decided to look at the paper log. It took me 3 days to find the right moment. Rosalind had a dentist appointment on a Wednesday afternoon, and Monica and Eric both left by 4. I waited until the office was empty, then opened Rosalind's desk drawer. The paper log went back 2 years to when I'd started. Every Thursday at 4:30 t.m., no other information, no phone number, no insurance, no intake paperwork. I flipped back further to the months before I'd been hired and found the same notation, going back another year. 3 years of Thursday appointments with someone who didn't officially exist. I took a photo with my phone, just 1 page, just the most recent entries, and put the log back exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat at my desk and tried to steady my breathing. There were explanations. Maybe TM was a colleague. Maybe Rosalind was doing supervision or consultation, not therapy. Maybe he paid cash and didn't want insurance records. None of that was illegal, but none of it explained why she'd been so tense that day he didn't show up, or why she'd started locking her door. That night, I did something I'd promised myself I'd never do. I Googled her. Rosalind Amherst had an impeccable professional history. PhD from University of Washington, postdoctoral work at Oregon Health and Science University, 23 years in private practice. She'd published articles on trauma-informed care, served on the board of a nonprofit focused on domestic violence survivors, spoken at conferences. There were photos of her receiving awards, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at fundraisers. There was also a news article from 2019 archived in the Oregonian. Small piece, easy to miss, Dr. Roslyn. Amherst had been called to testify in a custody case involving a client. The details were vague, sealed records, a minor involved, but the judge had ruled in favor of the mother, citing Dr. Amherst's expert testimony as pivotal. I clicked through to the case name, but the documents were restricted. I tried a few more searches, different combinations of keywords, and found nothing else. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark. The next Thursday, I watched TM arrive. He looked the same, controlled, weary, expensive watch catching the light as he knocked on Rosalind's door. But this time, when the session ended and he left, I saw Rosalind's face as she closed the door behind him. She looked afraid. It was a subtle thing, a tightness around her eyes, a hesitation in the way she moved. But it was there, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I started documenting. Not because I knew what I was documenting, but because my instinct, the one that had kept me alive through the worst year of my life, told me I needed to. I noted the dates and times TM arrived. I noted when Rosalind locked her door, when she stayed late, when she took phone calls in the hallway instead of her office. I noted the day in early April when she came in with a bruise on her wrist, faint but visible, and told me she'd tripped on her porch steps. I didn't believe her. I also started noticing other things. Small discrepancies. Rosalind had always been meticulous about billing, but now there were gaps. Sessions that should have been billed to insurance but weren't. Co-pays that were marked as collected but never deposited. Nothing large, $50 here, $75 there, but consistent enough to form a pattern. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was projecting my own history onto someone who'd done nothing but treat me with kindness and respect. But then in late April, Monica pulled me aside. We were alone in the kitchen midday, and she closed the door before she spoke. "Has Rosalind seemed off to you?" she asked. I measured my response. "In what way?" "I don't know. Distracted? Tense. She snapped at me yesterday over a scheduling conflict that wasn't even a big deal. That's not like her." "Maybe she's stressed, huh?" I said. Monica frowned. "Maybe. But I've worked with her for 4 years, and I've never seen her like this. And then there's the thing with Eric." "What thing?" "He gave notice. 2 weeks. Said he found a position at a clinic in Beaverton, but that's not a step up for him. If anything, it's a step down. I think something happened." "Did he say what?" "No. But he asked me if I'd ever noticed anything unusual about Rosalind's practice, about how she handles certain clients." My pulse quickened. "What did you tell him?" "That I hadn't. But now I'm wondering if I should have paid closer attention." She looked at me. "You manage the schedule. Have you noticed anything?" I thought about the paper log, about TM, about the discrepancies in the billing. I thought about the bruise on Rosalind's wrist. "No," I lied, "nothing unusual." Monica nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "Okay, well, if you do, let me know. I like Rosalind. I don't want to think she's in some kind of trouble, but I also don't want to be blind if something's wrong." After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. My hands were shaking. That night, I went back through the billing records I'd been documenting. The gaps weren't random. They all corresponded to Thursday afternoons. Sessions with TM that should have generated invoices but didn't. I pulled up the practice's bank account. Rosalind had given me read-only access for reconciliation purposes and cross-referenced the deposits. The money was going somewhere, but not into the practice account, which meant Rosalind was either being paid in cash or not being paid at all. Neither option made sense, unless she wasn't being paid, unless she was paying him. The thought landed like a stone in my stomach. I spent the next week trying to find a way to ask Rosalind about TM without revealing that I'd been paying attention. But every time I tried to formulate the question, it sounded like an accusation, and I didn't have proof of anything except my own suspicion. Then, on the first Thursday in May, TM didn't just show up for his appointment. He arrived 3 hours early. I was alone in the office. Monica was at a conference, Eric was already gone, and Rosalind was in session with a client. TM walked in like he owned the place, past my desk, straight to Rosalind's office door. He tried the handle. Locked. "Excuse me," I said, standing. "Can I help you?" He turned to look at me. Up close, he was older than I'd thought. Late 40s, maybe 50. Expensive suit, tired eyes, and something else. A hardness around his mouth that made my skin prickle. "I need to see Dr. Amherst," he said. "She's with a client. Her next opening is at 4:30. "I know when my appointment is." His voice was flat. "Tell her I'm here. I can't interrupt a session. If you'd like to wait, I'm not waiting." He stepped closer. Not threatening, exactly, but deliberate. "You're new. You don't understand how this works. Go get her. Now." I didn't move. "Sir, I need you to take a seat or leave. If you can't do that, I'll call the police." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was worse than the hardness. "You don't want to do that," he said softly. "Trust me." He left, just turned and walked out, calm as anything. I stood there, heart pounding, until I heard his car start in the parking lot. When Rosalind's session ended and her client left, I knocked on her door. She looked up from her notes, surprised. "Evelyn, what is it?" "Someone was here earlier. A man. He wanted to see you during your session. I told him to wait or leave, and he left, but he said something that concerned me." Her face went still. "What did he look like?" I described TM. She closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "Thank you for handling it," she said. "That was the right call." "Who is he?" "A client." He seemed to think the rules didn't apply to him. Some clients have that impression. She looked at me, and I saw the exhaustion in her face, the weight she was carrying. "I'll talk to him. It won't happen again." "Rosalind," I said carefully, "if you're in some kind of situation, if someone's putting pressure on you, I can help. Or we can find someone who can help." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I appreciate that, Evelyn. But I'm fine, really." I didn't believe her. But I also knew I'd pushed as far as I could. That Thursday, TM arrived at 4:30 exactly. He didn't look at me. Rosalind let him in, and the session proceeded as usual. But when he left, she didn't come out of her office. I waited until 6, then knocked. "Rosalind, are you okay?" No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. "Rosalind, I'm going to call someone if you don't answer." A long pause, then her voice muffled. "I'm fine. Go home, Evelyn. I'm not leaving you here alone." Another pause. Then the lock clicked and the door opened. Rosalind stood there, still dressed, still composed, but her eyes were red. "I'm fine," she said again. "Thank you for caring, but I need you to go home." I hesitated. "Please," she said, and there was something in her voice, not anger, but pleading, that made me step back. "Okay," I said, "but call me if you need anything. I mean it." She nodded and closed the door. I drove home through the rain, hands tight on the wheel, and knew I couldn't ignore this anymore. The next morning, I called in sick. Then I went to the Clackamas County Courthouse and pulled the case file from 2019, the one where Rosalind had testified. It took me 3 hours and 2 different clerks, but I finally got access to the unsealed portions. The case involved a couple, Thomas and Meredith. Whitley, fighting for custody of their daughter. Thomas was a commercial real estate developer. Meredith had been a stay-at-home mother. The divorce had been acrimonious, with allegations of emotional abuse on both sides. Rosalind had been Meredith's therapist. She'd testified that Meredith was a fit parent, that Thomas's behavior had been controlling and psychologically harmful, and that the daughter would be at risk in his custody. The judge had awarded primary custody to Meredith. 6 months later, Meredith had died. Car accident, single vehicle, late at night. The police had ruled it an accident. She'd been driving in heavy rain, lost control on a curve, went over an embankment. No evidence of foul play. Thomas Whitley had been awarded full custody of his daughter. I sat in the courthouse library staring at the documents and felt the pieces click together. T.M. Thomas Meredith, the initials, the sessions that didn't exist in the system, the fear on Rosalind's face. He was blackmailing her. I didn't know how or why, but I knew it as certainly as I knew my own name. He blamed her for losing custody of his daughter. And now that his ex-wife was dead, he had leverage, something he could use to hurt Rosalind, to destroy her career, to make her pay. And she was letting him because she thought she had no choice. I took photos of every page of the file, then went home and laid out everything I'd documented. The billing discrepancies, the locked doors, the sessions off the books. I tried to find a pattern, a reason, something that would tell me what he wanted from her. Money made sense, but the amounts were too small. Control made sense, but weekly therapy sessions were a strange way to exert it. Unless that was the point. Unless the sessions themselves were the punishment. Forcing her to sit with him, to listen to him, to be complicit in his presence every week. To know he could destroy her reputation, her livelihood, anytime he chose. It was elegant, in a horrifying way. And it explained why Rosalind had become so careful, so tense. She was trying to manage a situation that had no good outcome. I spent the weekend trying to decide what to do. I couldn't go to the police. I had no proof of a crime. I couldn't go to the state licensing board. Rosalind hadn't violated any ethics rules that I could prove. And I couldn't confront Thomas directly without putting Rosalind at greater risk. But I also couldn't do nothing. On Monday, I went to work and told Rosalind I needed to talk to her, privately. She looked at me across her desk, and I saw the moment she understood that I knew. Her face didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Resignation, maybe, or relief. "How much have you figured out?" she asked quietly. "Enough. Thomas Whitley. The custody case, the sessions every Thursday." She leaned back in her chair. "You've been thorough. I'm worried about you." "You should be worried about yourself," she said, but not unkindly. "If Thomas finds out you know, he'll consider you a liability, and he doesn't tolerate liabilities. What does he want from you?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Penance." "For what?" "For telling the truth in court, for helping his ex-wife keep custody of their daughter. He's convinced that if I hadn't testified, Meredith wouldn't have won, and she'd still be alive. He believes I'm responsible for her death." "That's insane." "Yes, but he's also influential and vindictive, and he has connections that could make my life very difficult. He's threatened to file a complaint with the licensing board claiming I falsified records and accepted bribes from Meredith. He has documents, forged, obviously, but convincing enough to trigger an investigation that could take years and cost me everything. So you let him come here every week. I let him vent his rage in a controlled environment where he can't hurt anyone else. And in exchange, he doesn't destroy my career." She looked at me. "It's not a good solution, Evelyn, but it's the only one I have." I thought about the bruise on her wrist. "Has he hurt you?" "Not physically, not yet." "What about the billing discrepancies? The money?" She smiled faintly. "You really have been thorough. The missing co-pays go to a fund I set up for his daughter. She's 12 now, living with Thomas, and I worry about her. The money's not much, but it's something. If things ever go badly for her, she'll have a way out." I sat with that. It was illegal, misappropriating client funds, even for a good reason, but it was also deeply, painfully human. "You can't keep doing this," I said. "I know." "So what's the plan?" She looked at me steadily. "I don't have one. That's why I'm telling you this. Because if something happens to me, I need someone who knows the truth. Someone who can protect that little girl if Thomas turns his attention to her. You think he'd hurt his own daughter? I think. He's capable of anything when he feels wronged. And I think Meredith knew that. It's why she fought so hard for custody. I left her office feeling like I'd been handed a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. Over the next few weeks, I watched Rosalind more carefully. She was good at hiding the toll the situation was taking, but I saw the cracks. The nights she stayed late, sitting in her office with the lights off, the days she seemed to move through the world at half speed, as if every action required effort. The way she'd flinch when her phone rang. Thomas continued his Thursday appointments. I started documenting those too, noting the times, the length of each session, any changes in his behavior. He never acknowledged me. To him, I was furniture, but I was watching. In June, something shifted. Thomas arrived for his appointment agitated, his movements sharp and erratic. The session ran long, 2 hours instead of 1, and when he left, I heard raised voices. Not shouting, but intense. Rosalind's voice firm and low, Thomas's voice cutting. After he was gone, Rosalind called me into her office. I need you to do something for me, she said, and I need you to not ask questions. She handed me a thumb drive. This has copies of all the documentation related to the Whitley case. My session notes with Meredith, the custody evaluation, my testimony. Also evidence of Thomas's threats against me. Emails, voicemails, texts. I've been collecting it for 2 years. Why are you giving this to me? Because if something happens, I need it to exist somewhere he can't reach. Put it in a safety deposit box. Don't tell me where. Don't tell anyone. Rosalind, please, Evelyn. I know you think I should go to the police, should fight back, should do something dramatic and definitive. But this is how I survive. By being prepared. She looked at me. And by trusting you. I took the thumb drive. That night, I opened it on my laptop and read everything. The emails were worse than I'd imagined. Thomas wasn't just angry. He was obsessed. He blamed Rosalind for every hardship since the divorce, every difficulty with his daughter, every moment of his life that hadn't gone according to plan. He'd written to her weekly, sometimes daily, detailing his grievances and his plans for retribution. The voicemails were recordings of their therapy sessions. She documented everything, his threats and manipulations, the way he spoke about his ex-wife with contempt, the casual mentions of accidents and unfortunate outcomes. And there were notes about his daughter, Paige. She was struggling. Poor grades, social withdrawal, signs of depression. Rosalind had tried to convince Thomas to get her therapy, but he'd refused. He saw it as a weakness, an admission that he wasn't a good enough parent. Rosalind had been trying to protect Paige the only way she could, by enduring Thomas's abuse so he didn't turn it on his daughter. The next day, I went to a bank I didn't normally use and rented a safety deposit box under my name. I put the thumb drive inside along with my own documentation of the billing discrepancies and session logs. Then I went to work and told Rosalind it was done. She nodded. Thank you. What happens now? Now we wait. For what? For Thomas to make a mistake. 2 weeks later he did. I was closing the office late on a Tuesday when I heard a key in the front door. I looked up, expecting Monica or Eric, but it was Thomas. He walked in like he belonged there, and I realized with a sick jolt that he had a key. Rosalind must have given it to him. We're closed, I said, standing. He ignored me, heading straight for Rosalind's office. Her door was locked, but he had a key for that too. You can't go in there, I said, moving toward him. He turned, and for the first time he looked at me like I was a person. You should leave. Not until you do. He smiled. Loyal? That's good. Rosalind needs loyalty. He unlocked her office door and stepped inside. I pulled out my phone and called her. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Evelyn, Thomas is here in your office. He has keys. A pause, then very calmly. Get out, right now. Don't argue, just go. I'm not leaving. Evelyn. Her voice was sharp now. He's dangerous when he's cornered, and he's feeling cornered. Get out. I'll handle this. I hesitated. Then I heard Thomas's voice from inside the office, speaking to someone on his phone. Yeah, I'm here. The files are in her desk. Give me 5 minutes. Files. He was looking for files. I hung up on Rosalind and did something reckless. I walked to her office door and stood in the frame. The police are on their way, I lied. You need to leave. Thomas looked up from the desk drawer he'd been rifling through. No, they're not. Try me. He studied me, then set down the folder he'd been holding. You don't know what you're in the middle of. I know you're breaking and entering. I know you're trying to steal confidential files. That's enough. Those files are about my daughter. I have a right to them. You have a right to request them through proper channels, not to break into a locked office after hours. He stepped toward me, not fast but deliberate. Rosalind has been lying to you, about me, about our arrangement. Whatever she told you, it's not the whole truth. Then tell me your version. My version is that she destroyed my family. She convinced my wife to leave me, poisoned my daughter against me, and testified in court that I was an unfit parent, all because Meredith paid her to. That's not how therapy works. That's exactly how therapy works when the therapist has an agenda. He was close now, close enough that I could see the anger in his eyes, the barely controlled rage. Rosalind thinks she's protecting Paige by managing me, but what she's really doing is making everything worse. Paige needs stability. She needs her father. And Rosalind keeps interfering. By letting you come here every week to harass her. By recording our sessions without my consent. By building a case against me. He nodded toward the desk. She thinks I don't know. But I know. And I'm taking back control. I heard a car in the parking lot, Rosalind's car. You should go, I said. Not without those files. Then you'll be here when the police arrive, because I did call them 2 minutes ago. I hadn't, but he believed me. I saw the calculation in his face, the moment he decided the files weren't worth the risk. He walked past me, close enough that I felt the air shift, and left. I stood there shaking until Rosalind came in. She looked at me, then at her office, then back at me. Are you okay? I'm fine. He didn't hurt me. But he tried to take the files. He didn't get them. She walked to her desk, checked the drawer, and pulled out a folder. This is what he wanted. Paige's records, intake notes, assessments, everything. Paige is your client? She was, briefly, last year. Thomas didn't know. I saw her through the school counseling program, not here. But he found out recently, and he's been trying to get the records to prove I violated some boundary, which I didn't. Everything was by the book. Why does he want them? To file a complaint, to say I had a conflict of interest, that I was biased against him because I'd already formed a clinical opinion about his parenting. It's thin, but it's enough to start an investigation. She sat down heavily. I'm tired, Evelyn. I'm so tired of this. I pulled up a chair. Then let's end it. She looked at me. How? We go to the police. Not about the therapy. About tonight. Breaking and entering, attempted theft. That's a crime. That's something they can act on. He'll say I gave him the key. Did you? Not for tonight. I gave him a key last year, when I thought we could work through this like rational adults. But I never authorized him to come here after hours, and I certainly didn't authorize him to go through my files. Then we tell them that. We show them the pattern, the threats, the coercion, the escalation. We use your documentation. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, if I do this, he'll go after Paige. He'll make her life hell to punish me. If you don't, he'll keep escalating until someone gets hurt. And it might be you or it might be her. But either way, you're not protecting her by doing nothing. She looked at me and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Hope. You're right, she said. Okay, let's do it. We called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers who took our statements and photographed the office. Rosalind gave them the key Thomas had, along with a timeline of his behavior and copies of the threatening emails. They told her they'd follow up, that someone from the detective division would contact her. They were professional but non-committal. I could tell they thought this was a domestic issue, messy and complicated, not the kind of case that got priority. But it was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved slowly. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Ortega, interviewed Rosalind twice. She asked about Thomas, about Meredith, about the custody case and the therapy sessions. Rosalind told her everything, holding nothing back. Ortega listened, took notes, and said she'd be in touch. Thomas didn't come back to the office. His Thursday appointments stopped. At first, I thought that was a good sign, that he'd been scared off, that Rosalind was finally free. Then Rosalind got a letter from the Oregon Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists. A formal complaint had been filed against her, alleging unethical conduct in her treatment of Meredith Whitley and conflict of interest in her treatment of Paige Whitley. The board was opening an investigation. She read the letter in her office, door closed, and when she came out, her face was gray. "He did it," she said. "He actually did it." The investigation would take months, maybe longer. During that time, Rosalind's reputation would be under scrutiny. Even if she was exonerated, the stain would remain. Clients would question her. Colleagues would whisper. Her career, everything she'd built over 2 decades, was at risk. That night, I sat in my apartment and thought about the thumb drive in the safety deposit box, about the evidence Rosalind had collected, the proof of Thomas's threats and manipulation, and I thought about the fact that none of it mattered if he succeeded in destroying her first. I needed leverage, something that would make Thomas back off, not just for now, but permanently. I started by researching Thomas Whitley, his business, his finances, his public record. He was a successful developer, but success didn't mean clean. I dug into his projects, looking for patterns, and found something interesting. 3 of his developments had been delayed by environmental reviews. 2 had eventually been approved, but 1, a luxury condo complex in Bend, had been shut down after evidence of wetland violations. The fines had been significant, but not enough to ruin him. What interested me was the timeline. The violations had been reported anonymously, and the investigation had started 6 months before Meredith's death. I pulled the court records for the custody case again, reading more carefully this time. Meredith's attorney had argued that Thomas's business practices were reckless and unethical, that he prioritized profit over legality. Thomas had countered that the allegations were baseless, that his ex-wife was trying to smear him. But what if they weren't baseless? What if Meredith had been the one to report him? I spent the next week digging deeper, calling county offices, requesting public records, tracing the timeline of complaints and investigations. It was tedious work, but I had learned patience, and then I found it. An email buried in the public records request from the Department of Environmental Quality. It was addressed to the investigator assigned to the wetland case, and it referenced an anonymous tip that had included detailed information about Thomas's construction schedule and the location of protected habitats. The email had been sent from a Gmail account, M. Whitley 1977, 2 weeks before Meredith died. She'd been the whistleblower. She'd reported him, and he'd found out. The car accident suddenly looked a lot less accidental. I took everything I'd found, the email, the timeline, the patterns, and brought it to Detective Ortega. I didn't have proof that Thomas had caused Meredith's death, but I had enough to raise questions, to make someone look closer. Ortega listened, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "You realize this is speculation." "I realize, but it's worth investigating." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "This isn't your fight." I thought about the ring on the table, about the way my mother had looked at me after the charges were dropped, about the years I'd spent invisible, keeping my head down, telling myself that safety meant not making waves. "Because someone has to," I said. Ortega reopened Meredith's case. It took 3 months, but they found evidence. Traces of sedatives in Meredith's autopsy report that had been dismissed as prescription medication. Financial records showing Thomas had hired a private investigator to follow Meredith in the weeks before her death. Testimony from a colleague who remembered Thomas making offhand comments about how convenient it would be if Meredith had an accident. None of it was definitive, but it was enough to shift the investigation from closed to active, and it was enough to make Thomas nervous. The complaint against Rosalind was quietly withdrawn in late September. The board sent a letter stating that the allegations had been deemed unfounded and that no further action would be taken. Thomas Whitley was arrested in October, charged with tampering with evidence in the original accident investigation. The charges related to Meredith's death were still under review, but the tampering charge stuck. He posted bail, but his business partnership started to dissolve. His reputation, everything he'd fought so hard to protect, began to crumble. Paige went to live with Meredith's sister, a woman in Seattle who'd been fighting for custody since the accident. Rosalind helped facilitate the transition, providing records and testimony that supported the aunt's petition. I saw Thomas one more time in early November. He showed up at the office unannounced on a Tuesday morning when Rosalind was out. He looked diminished somehow, his expensive suit hanging a little loose, his face drawn. "I need to see her," he said. "She's not here." "When will she be back?" "She won't. Not for you." He stared at me. "You did this. You went digging." "I followed the evidence." "You destroyed my life." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You think you saved Rosalind, but all you did was make her a target. People like me don't forget." "People like you end up in prison," I said. He left. I never saw him again. Rosalind closed the practice in December, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She was tired, she said. Tired of the work, tired of the wait, tired of carrying other people's traumas while her own went unexamined. She paid me through the end of the year, plus a severance that was more generous than it needed to be. On my last day, she gave me a letter of recommendation and a hug. "You saved my life," she said. "I don't know if you realize that." "You saved mine first," I said. She laughed. "By giving you a job?" "By trusting me." I spent the spring working temp jobs and figuring out what came next. I thought about going back to school, finishing my degree. I thought about staying in Oregon or moving somewhere new, somewhere I didn't have history. In April, I got a call from Detective Ortega. Thomas Whitley had been indicted on charges related to Meredith's death. Not murder, but criminally negligent homicide and evidence tampering. The trial was set for the following year. "I thought you'd want to know," Ortega said. "None of this would have happened without you." "I just asked questions." "That's more than most people do." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and thought about the girl I'd been at 19, sitting in an interrogation room with a ring on the table and a mother who couldn't look at me. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to be invisible, trying to be small enough that the world couldn't hurt me again. And I thought about how sometimes the only way to survive isn't to hide, but to stand up and make someone see you. I still live in Milwaukee. I still keep my circle small, but I don't live scared anymore. Last month, I got an email from Paige Whitley. She's 14 now, doing well in school, seeing a therapist her aunt found for her. She'd heard about what happened, about my part in it, and wanted to thank me. "You didn't know me," she wrote, "but you helped me anyway. I don't think I would have survived another year with my dad. So thank you for seeing something was wrong, for doing something about it." I cried when I read it. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from relief, from the release of a weight you didn't know you were carrying. I wrote back and told her the truth, that I hadn't done it for her, not at first, that I'd done it because I saw someone I cared about in pain, and I couldn't walk away. But I also told her that I was glad she was safe, glad she had people who loved her, glad that sometimes, when you ask the right questions, the truth is enough. She responded a few days later, just 2 sentences. Do you think people can be good, even after bad things happen to them? I thought about my answer for a long time. Then I wrote, I think people can choose to be good, and that's harder, but it matters more. She hasn't written back yet, but I check my email every day just in case. It's June now, and Portland is having one of those rare stretches of clear weather that makes everyone forget how much it rains here. I'm working at a nonprofit that helps people expunge criminal records, doing intake and advocacy. The pay is less than what Rosalind gave me, but the work feels right. My mother and I talk sometimes. Not often, but more than we used to. She asked me once if I ever thought about what happened with Gerald Tennyson, the theft charge that derailed my early 20s. All the time, I said. Do you ever wish you'd handled it differently? I thought about that. No, I think I handled it the only way I could at the time, and everything after all of it led me here. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm proud of you. Evelyn? It was the first time she'd said it since I was a child. I don't know if Thomas Whitley will be convicted. I don't know if Rosalind will ever go back to practicing therapy. I don't know if Paige will be okay, or if the work I do now will make a difference to anyone. But I know that I'm not hiding anymore. I know that when I see something wrong, I don't look away. And I know that sometimes the smallest act, paying attention, asking questions, refusing to be silent, can save a life. Mine, Rosalind's, Paige's. Maybe that's enough.